Is there any value for money in a Harley Davidson? Watch this video. Hello, welcome to RevelatorAlf. I hope you're all well. So this video is all about the value for money of motorcycles in general, the more expensive ones I'm talking about, and certainly in particular, we're going to be talking about Harley Davidsons. Now, I recently saw a video where one YouTuber was dissecting or critiquing what another YouTuber was saying about Harley Davidson Live, about the value for money of Harley Davidsons in particular. And this kind of struck a chord with me because of the kind of content that I produce, and I'm always talking about value for money. Now, one hand, you could say that there is no value for money in any motorcycle, okay, or in any expensive product, because it really depends on what you gauge as value. So if we're just talking about a mode of transport, in the case of motorcycles, a mode of transport, then really you want something that's as reliable and as efficient as possible, and you're going to buy it for the lowest cost price as possible. Therefore, you're going to get the best value out of that mode of transport for the least amount of money. That is kind of value for money. But in terms of overall value, well, you can't really put a price on that. And this is when I talk about Harley Davidsons in particular, because I ride a Harley Davidson. I'm a fan of the brand. I mean, I like the bikes. I've always loved the bikes and I've always liked Harley Davidson. I just critique them, and I just think they could do so much better in so many different ways. But one of the things that I always say is, well, in terms of value for money of Harley Davidson, I'm not sure it's there for the bigger motorcycles anymore. In fact, I'm not sure there's value in those motorcycles when you compare them with what else is on the market. But what I always say is, and hopefully this has come across in many different videos, is that if you don't think there's value for money in a brand new Harley Davidson, that doesn't mean you have to walk away from the brand. That doesn't mean that you have to, dismiss Harley Davidson as a manufacturer completely. I've always said there's great value in the used bike market. Just go and buy a used Harley Davidson, because there's some great ones out there, and you'll get low mileage Harley Davidsons for, £3,000, £4,000, £5,000, dollars, shekels, whatever, below whatever the original price was. You'll get a great deal, and these bikes will just run and run and run. If you look after them, they'll just run and run and run. So in terms of what you would class as value for money, it really depends. It really depends where you gauge that and what benefit you're going to get from it. And one of the points that one of the YouTubers was making is to say, well, there's great value in just owning it, in kind of meeting like-minded people, in camaraderie, or a motorcycle that is really good at a particular kind of thing, let's say like touring motorcycles. And I could not agree more. They are fantastic for that. They are motorcycles in general, I think, are fantastic for just meeting people and just sparking up conversations. And I think, again, I'm one of these people that it doesn't matter what anybody rides. It doesn't matter what. I don't have a favorite between this brand or that brand, or this motorcycle or that motorcycle, in terms of objectively looking at it. I have my personal favorites, and I have a favorite in terms of what I possibly would like to buy, or what I currently ride, or what I would always ride, that kind of thing. And does it suit my style of riding these days? But in terms of just look at another bike, I'd say, yeah, great, I would definitely get on it and ride it. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be the cheapest or the most expensive. It could be the ugliest, in inverted commas, or the most beautiful bike. It really depends. But regardless, I would still want to get on it and ride, because that's the kind of person I am. I would class myself as a biker, as a rider, who's somebody who just wants to get on bikes and ride. That's what I want to do. And I look at all bikes from that point of view. And objectively, yes, I can say where the strengths and weaknesses are in terms of a style of riding, and might it suit one kind of person as opposed to another kind of person. But objectively, I'm going to enjoy riding that bike, whatever it is. So value for money is a bit of a tricky one to quantify and also justify. It's easy for somebody who's got, let's say, a big wad of cash at home, or can afford the finance, or whatever it is, to say, I'm going to go into a Harley Davidson dealership and I'm going to spend £30,000, dollars, shekels, whatever it is, on a brand new Tourer with a few accessories on it. And, I'll be perfectly happy with that. Let's say it's the difference between buying a standard street glide and a CVO street glide. You know, what can you really justify spending the extra £10,000 or whatever it is on a CVO? Do you really get that much more value out of it? Well, people who are buying the CVO will say, yeah, I am getting the value out of it because I wanted to pay that extra for it, and it's got all these extra little refinements on it that I see is great. And, you know, it doesn't matter what it costs. If I can afford it, then that's great. My criticism of Harley Davidson in terms of value for money, has never been on those who can afford it. My question's always been, one, how many people these days can afford it or are willing to pay for that value? And we know that the numbers of people in that position are reducing, and they're aging out, and they're less likely to want to spend that kind of money on a big motorcycle purchase. The other aspect here, which I always kind of talk about, is in terms of value. Would it attract a brand new person to the brand, to Harley Davidson? Would it bring somebody from another brand where they're already riding motorcycles, or somebody who's never ridden motorcycles? Would that price tag on what that product is there enough value in there to draw somebody in? Now, again, this really depends where you are and what social circle you're in and what riding circle you might be in, because some people might say, yeah, I'm going to buy a Harley Davidson because all my friends have got Harley Davidsons, and guess what? I want to be part of the group. I want to be part of, you know, the collective, as it were. Other people would say, no, I just love that bike. I don't care what anybody else is riding. I love that bike. So all my other friends are riding Triumphs and BMWs and Kawasaki's, but I like a Harley. So you either stand up tall and say, I either want to buy it because I want to be part of the group, or I want to buy it because I just like the bike and I like it for what it is. So value is a very tricky thing to determine, because it means something completely different from one person to another. And it is difficult to compare one motorcycle to another as well. However, let's just say if we're taking Harley Davidsons for touring, well, there are some great other touring motorcycles and great motorcycles like that that you wouldn't necessarily class as tourers in the traditional sense, but let's say adventure bikes. They are fantastic at touring. Other motorcycles, let's say from other brands, you know, they are great motorcycles that you've got boxes on the side, you can strap things to. They've got lots of tech on there, and yeah, they're fantastic. They are really great motorcycles to ride, to sit in the saddle all day. But they also miss something. They lack a certain je ne sais quoi, whatever it is, that Harley Davidson always have. You can't get away from it. I've always said this, that Harley Davidson and let's say Indian, for example, as well, and a couple of other brands, they have that curb appeal. They have that certain thing that people are going to want to turn their heads. I think Ducati, you could say they have a similar kind of thing. But I don't think there's anything quite like a Harley Davidson, and perhaps an Indian on that part as well, that turns people's heads. They look at it and go, wow. Now, whether they're looking at it from a nostalgia point of view, whether they're looking at it kind of, it looks nice aesthetically, whatever it is, it looks nice. But whatever it is, Harley Davidson have it, whereas other brands don't. So there's a huge amount of value in just that thing, that unquantifiable thing that this brand has over that brand. I've always liked Harley Davidsons. I just never thought that Harley Davidson was my kind of motorcycle that I wanted to do. This is when I was younger, right? Then as I grew up, my riding style changed. I got into different things. You know, it was less about speed. It was less about, you know, point to point and things like that. It was, about doing different kinds of things. It was enjoying my environment. It was less about touring in many ways. It was more about just enjoying my environment and slowing down. And I've discussed this in the past when I was talking about my adventure bike riding as well. I really enjoyed that kind of riding because I just wasn't going at 100 miles an hour everywhere. I was just sort of slowing down and just taking everything in. And the natural progression for me on road, and I always wanted to have a Harley Davidson by that point, was to say, no, actually, a Harley Davidson is my kind of riding. And then when I got it, I immediately saw that it was the best connection that I had with a motorcycle ever, possibly. So in terms of the value that I've got from riding this Harley Davidson, it's probably the best value that I've ever had in terms of riding experience. But I know, and I repeatedly say, They're not performance bikes. They're not bikes that you can, ping around a bend. They're not bikes that you're going to thrash around. They're heavy bikes. They're lumpy bikes. All these other things, they need to be handled with kid gloves in some respects. And in other respects, they don't. They're perfectly robust and they just go riding forever and ever. They're just absolutely fantastic bikes. The other thing that was labelled at the Harley Davidson is that they're old tech. And I hear this so many times, that they're old tech and they haven't moved on. On one hand, that is true in terms of the original design, but on the other hand, there is tech on there, and they have improved it over the years. Now, they've incorporated quite decent tech on there, especially in the Taurus over the last few years as well. And this has trickled down into other bikes, but they are a manufacturer. They're not 100 years behind. They are just catering to a certain type of rider or certain people who want to ride in a certain way. My criticism, again, of Harley Davidson is that type of person or that kind of rider is narrowing, and they're not catering to any other style of rider. Yes, they did it with the Pan America, of course, but I think they needed to capitalize on this thing a little bit more. So for me, Harley Davidson, they have a lot of value, but it's an unquantifiable value, and it's just something that is purely subjective. I can't say to you that if you buy your Harley Davidson, you're going to have so much value for money. What I can say is if you can afford it, then go and buy it. If that's what you want to do, great, go and buy it. I'm not going to put you off. I'm certainly not going to say that another bike is better than a Harley Davidson. It might be, in my eyes, it might be in many people's eyes, but for you, it might be something completely different. You want that Harley Davidson, that's exactly what you want. It could be the same for any other brand. You want a Ducati, you want a BMW, you want a Triumph, you want a Kawasaki, a Honda, whatever it is. If you like that motorcycle, then nobody has the right to say that you're wrong. You like it for whatever it is. Now, some people prefer lots of tech on their motorcycles. I do to a certain degree. In fact, I do enjoy technology and the advances in technology and the evolution of technology. But in terms of just a bike that I like, actually, I like it a little bit more simple. And in many ways, this is why I've kind of been singing the praises of brands like Royal Enfield over the last few years, because they don't deliver on performance. They don't deliver on a bike that is super high tech, but they deliver in another way, a super valuable way in terms of mobility, fun riding, old school riding, and just at a very reasonable price as well. So this is where we kind of talk about value for money. I think there's a lot of value in Royal Enfields, for example. I think there's a lot of value in brands like BMW and Triumph as well. But I also think there's a lot of value in Harley Davidson. But depending on the kind of riding that you want to do, you can find alternatives out there, or you can find manufacturers that will deliver a motorcycle to you that will give you the same kind of value in terms of technical riding, performance, efficiency, handling, that kind of thing, and they'll deliver it at a much cheaper price. The only other aspect of value that you've got to kind of judge is whether it brings you that same kind of feeling, that same kind of enjoyment, that riding experience that, let's say, a Harley Davidson would, or an Indian, or whatever other motorcycle is of your choice. So if it doesn't, then regardless of the price point, you're not going to go to it, because let's say you just don't like it. You like your Harleys. So if the value of a brand new Harley Davidson is just too much, there's not enough value in there to spend £2,000 or £3,000, £4,000 more than you can get it in the used bike market. Or let's just say, if the prices go up in 2025, 2026, and they're way beyond your price point and you can't afford any financing, but you could definitely afford a used bike, then you're probably going to go that way as well. Because whatever the alternatives are, they just don't fulfill that extra bit of value that you want from that particular motorcycle that will deliver a certain kind of riding experience. So I wanted to make this video because I do talk about value for money a lot, and it's in